Welcome to the Naga's Lair with your host, the cryptozoologist. Now, on today's episode, for this particular topics, we're going to cover, do angels exist? Now, I covered that in another longer video, but this one won't be as long. And so I'm going to do that one again there, as well as mix in some other stuff. I'm also going to cover a lot about the woodwoosen, the wild man of Europe. So if you think Sasquatch is some kind of thing just created by one group here, it's spread all over the world, and it's so old that it's pretty well since we've ever been around, where there's these stories of them either captured, being owned by different royalty armies, different all kinds of stuff. At one point, they were actually fairly common in some parts of Europe, where they would actually intermingle with European natives in the different places and actually trap and fish and do all kinds of stuff that it seemed like as if they were kind of a bit more of a thing where they would have some more interaction with each other. But then they would reports, lots of them, of stealing children and things like this. This over time seemed to cause some kind of split between these wild people and the regular, non-hairy sorts as much. And this kind of had this dividing line. And then after that, reports are always way less and less and less and less, sort of thing, as well as a lot of the forests got drained out very early in certain parts of Europe and stuff like that. And of course, if there's no forest or no place for the animal to hide, if it was real, obviously they're not going to report it there because there's nothing to report. It's not right there at that moment, But maybe at one early time that there was a small, relic population of them holding on in some of these small, European countries and stuff like that. As well as we're going to cover the Russian lake monsters, and I'm also going to cover some of the rarest animals that are claimed to be extinct that may not be, as well as ones that are just about to be extinct any moment. And I don't want to get upset about it, so I'm going to try and make this more of a fun show, but I will kind of get the point home in those particular areas. I tried to do this show several times, and it upsets me every time when I think about the lions being shot off of reserves and these kinds of stuff like that. So it's hard for me to do. But nevertheless, we're going to continue on. So I'll try and keep a cheery note. And nothing I like better than talking about Russian lake monsters. There's all kinds of stuff in Russia that's fantastic. Including some of those Russian blondies there, but nevertheless, it's quite the country there. So beautiful. It's got the biggest, fish of the planet. Nearly some of them like giant whales, catfish. I've studied old records of. Early commercial records and things like that of whales, catfish reported over 15 feet in length. So, I mean, if that isn't a lake monster, that's a pretty big monster. And who's to say that's the biggest ever caught? You know what I mean? That's out there is what they caught. I mean, who's to know this, right? Like, so there's always something that huge. I mean, it's astounding that even the odd one that big was ever captured. I mean, I've heard stories same with sturgeon, where they've had to use a crane to get the thing in because it was so big, and things like that. So but here's some of the countries, just a small group of them. There's a lot more, but Italy. No, Italy doesn't have a heck of a lot of reports, but there's a little bit of stuff in there. And Scandinavia, Great Britain, and in older days before that, it was called Britannia. So long live Lord British there. And if you don't know who he is, if you're an RPG fan, he was the guy that kind of really about one of the earliest four sort of fathers of the video RPG game sort of era, and a great genius there with great story, character lines, and all kinds of stuff. So real fun sort of interesting RPG series if you're interested in that kind of thing. But then France, yes, even in France, they got the old Sasquatch there. Poland, this is where I've collected more stories actually than most of the other small countries. I've actually personally met people from Poland that claim they've seen a Sasquatch-like creature. Germany, same thing. I got an absolutely hilarious story later on coming up about this one lady I interviewed at a beer festival there that had the story of the century. I'll tell you, and she was quite the character. And it was yes, ma'am, all the way. I'll tell you that this lady was about 6 foot, maybe two on her, and all I can say is you wouldn't want to argue with her much. But nevertheless, then I'll go on to, of course, there's Hungary, Greece, Yugoslavia, where most of the reports are like Russia, Mongolia, places like that, Scotland, Transylvania. And these are just a few of some of the European ones. Now, it's interesting. Let us start off with some stories from way back to today in Great Britain. Also, reports go back much further, as I was mentioning, to the days of Britannia. But one interesting historical record shows about a man from the Clan Murray in the 1700s that had captured a wild man in a place called Craig Barnes Rocks. Okay, and on his family plaque, it actually shows a chained wild man on his crest, and you can find that online. It's very interesting. I mean, you gotta wonder, like, the main thing that kind of interests me about these kinds of stuff is that native culture people absolutely had no idea of these people. They weren't here yet, and things like that. Okay, yet they have the exact identical stories describing these things to the T. I mean, the odds of that would be astronomical, where different cultures could all develop the same imaginary boogeyman, exactly same kind of size, same description, same everything. It seems unfathomable. But it's much more fathomable just to, as the reports go over the thousands of years here, that the odd ones killed seemingly every so many hundreds of years here and there by somebody, some lucky thing, or they find one dead or whatever the case. It's then reported in some scientific book of the time or whatever it is, or different reports about it. And then it just disappears into the mist again. A few hundred years later, some new critic questions it again. Did it ever exist? And this has been continuing on to this day. There's much more of them seen today because there's way more people actually in these type of areas than what there was in previous times, because I mean the population wasn't remotely as large as it is today, although in some areas it was pretty huge. But I mean it's fluctuated on a up and down sort of a yo-yo throughout thousands of years here. And I mean, it would seem very, very improbable that different groups from different places could all exactly imagine the same thing. But it would be probable if they're always rare across their range, except maybe in a few rare cases. And back then, even they mentioned this in really old manuscripts that they were uncommon then. So I mean, if they were real, that would make perfect sense. Then why you would still have these continued sightings for thousands of years, while the other way to keep just imagining it, new groups of them in new places and new everything, it doesn't seem logical at all. I mean, seriously, to me that's a silly kind of a skeptical answer, because the odds would be very improbable that each one wouldn't have, like, why some wouldn't have four horns, and or maybe they got three buttocks on them, or two heads, or whatever, and these kinds of stuff. But you don't find these variants, and they're very similar right across the board. Wild men or Europe are said near any place reported to always be inhabiting either the woods, of course, caves, as well, typically spotted by people that were hunting or fishing or some kind of hiking, that sort of stuff. They've been seen in both continents and other places as well, digging for moles and rats and things like that, or chasing deer. So obviously they have an omnivorous diet pretty well across the board here. Everybody wants to think of them as some friendly little vegetarian, but I mean, you know, just imagine if you, like, let's say you got some big, you know, cousin there, Big Bubba McGee, and he's, you know, 7 foot on him nearly, and he can eat a steer for dinner, sort of an idea. Well, a guy like that, I mean, he probably going to be fairly hungry when, you know what I mean, and probably. You know, the odd times wild berries and stuff just aren't going to do it. And he's going to need something a little bit bigger and more meatier and juicier. And so, I mean, to me, it makes perfect common sense if this creature is real, that they could actually do that. I mean, they could catch a deer. I mean, if you look at the strength and the size are reported, and how agile and stuff that they are, it wouldn't be that hard to believe that they could capture the odd deer here and there. You know, now wild men, of course, are typically reported to be covered with hair, except on their hands, breast areas, and feet and face. You know. Typical across the board. There is exceptions to that. I find typically the more colder regions you go, and which I find very interesting, then all of a sudden the reports, they can barely see their eyes or their face, because it's fully covered with hair, which would make, again, 100% perfect sense. I mean, think about it. You're an animal, you're or a human or whatever, and you're now fully being pushed further and further into areas or something like that, and over time, your body, after children, starts to, even in a place like that, knows that it needs this extra protection in other areas, maybe to help so they see better or not sweat as much or whatever reason, then the hair is much thinner on their faces and stuff like that in some locales. I mean, that would make sense, you know, but there wouldn't mean that there couldn't be a variance of either. I mean, there's always going to be overly hairy people, just like there might be the odd gorilla that's more hairier than the next one, you know, sort of thing. So there's always that feasibility into it as well. But I just find it interesting that, again, if it's imagination, you'd wonder why more than all of a sudden in a place where it would make sense that you'd have more fur in the face, that you would then have that. Yeah, you know, so like, as a for instance here, you can see our buddy here, the Alma there, and he's just crawled out of one of his caves there. And the Mashir there run up and down the river, and many species of carp and barb-like fish, some trout-like species, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different ones in different areas, depending on where it is, all through Europe, that you're going to have these different fish species, that stuff like that. And a lot of them are reported on attacking these things, and even with clubs and diving in the water and interesting things, and which you see bears do, except without the clubs. But I mean, basically the same kind of thing. So it is interesting. Yeah, you know, now your typical two types of wild men, usually throughout Europe there, are a couple of kinds. You got more like a Neanderthal sort of a thing, where they typically got the club. Sometimes they're depicted with a unicorn horns or other bizarre sorts of some kind of a weapon. And then you have your typical more wild looking, like a gorilla sort of a thing, a Gigantopithecus type. And but both range in the usually between anywhere from a low end of about 6 feet tall to sometimes giant monsters of 13, 14, 15 feet tall. But generally speaking, one over 10 feet, 11, 12 feet is usually about the tallest of most reports. There's also shorter types. Some are odd, like that have web-like feet on them. Which you find also in North American cultures, which I find another one really fascinating. I mean, what would be the odds that you would invent in two different, like completely different continents here, where one group would, the natives there would see an ape-like creature, but supposedly has some kind of web-like footing, or at least looks like that when it's coming out of the rivers or stuff. Like, I mean, it could even be slime on their feet, that it's all kind of green and gross testes coming out of the water and the sludge, and it may make it look like that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they typically are one. And a couple of things I've thought of is either A, young Sasquatch tend to actually spend time in the water. Maybe it's if the parents are out foraging and stuff like that, maybe they find that a safer location for them to teach them how to hunt and stuff like that. It's possible. Or that it actually really is truly separate species of a smaller type ape and stuff like that, that is adapted to water somehow and created some kind of a web-like footing structure. I mean, it is possible that these things, I mean, it's not totally unheard of out in the world that such things, adaptations exist in different species. Oh, now that's what I wanted to mention too. And a lot of videos, I'd imagine some people must get a laugh thinking, "Oh my God, I hear this something flicking every second." Well, I'm trying to shut down to near nothing, but when you're talking and stuff like that, because I'm trying to not, do that much, and I'm trying to do this big show, I tend to relaxes me something like this, but it keeps, obviously, your cigarette will go out every, a minute or so, so then I gotta light it again. Anyways, I'm not giving anybody preaching. If you want to quit, don't quit, whatever. That's, I don't like that hypocritical sort of stuff. But for me, I just, one of those things that I decided to do. So, but now next, other interesting things that you'll find about European wild man is often they're credited with laughing or making like whistle-like sounds. Also throwing rocks. They're always typically reported like with a cone-like head, the long arms, monster legs, this sorts of stuff, which is identical again to North American reports. So again, it seems, I mean, seriously, folks, like, since there's thousands of years here of these same things, since there's pretty well every 100, 200 years, 50 years, something, there's some kind of a story of somebody capturing one somewhere, right? Let's say they were true, or some of them at least. It really, like, I mean, over all this time, what would be the odds of every single person in all these continents and all these natives from all these different tribes and all these people, what would be the odds of every single one of them imagining this? I mean, seriously, it's not logical. Why is it people are so stuck in the mentality that it just can't be, when again creatures keep being found all the time, and again they keep being spotted all the time? It's just simply a scientific person, even ones that have seen it, were not able to grab or capture one, so they can't prove it. Period. That's basically, you have physical proof that's left out there, but because we don't actually have a pet Sasquatch to hang out with us, we can't prove that it really is made from the Sasquatch. Therefore, it still sits on the fence, right? Something left it, obviously, but I mean, you can't say 100% that that's what it is. So, but the likelihoods of what else it could be would be zero. I mean, there's no other creature known that walks 10, 12 feet tall, walks like a man, looks like a gorilla. There's nothing else out there like that. So, I mean, obviously, if you found hairs that match no known species on Earth that are ape to human-like, very likely that must have came from those sightings, because that's the only thing out there that could match such a thing, unless there's something else out there that can hide even better from us, and Bigfoot's imaginary, but it's not, but somehow it can evade us every time without us ever seeing it. I mean, if you think about that, that's pretty slim too. So these are things, what I'm trying to do, get people, is for the skeptical to at least get an idea that, yes, I mean, a lot of stories may be silly. Yes, maybe there's a lot of things out there where it's imagination, it's this and that. But there's so many, and with so many with footprints and all kinds of stuff also found, or numerous witnesses, that you can't just sweep them all underneath the carpet like that. As if, for instance, vampires are often reported with a huge variance in description. sizes, habits, as well as flying abilities, magic abilities, etc. You have all kinds of stuff. But in the world of Sasquatch, you really they look near identical across the board, except variance in height, which could be explained by adult to children, teenagers, whatever. Or by several species, one being confused with the other, but both unknown sort of ape sort of things. Then, but with vampires or a lot of imaginary sorts of things out there, even though a lot of people would argue that there is such thing as vampires, and there could very well be, yeah, but I mean, nevertheless, I mean, in the fantasy world of vampires, a lot harder to believe in a flying vampire guy flying around, or I mean, if I had to be captured by a bunch of vampires, I'd prefer it to be something like poor old Charlie Sheen there with the those ladies there that captured him on one of the shows there. I mean, if you had to be captured by a pile of vampires, I mean that would be a much better situation there. But nevertheless, besides that though, the only variance we have something like that is bat squatch. Half man, half Bigfoot, half a bat sort of a like thing. And I've collected reports of them. I have no idea what that really is. That's a totally different thing. But nevertheless, it just goes to show that, I mean, when making up like fantasy sorts of stuff, each new person, writer, person, whatever, will then start to add new things to it to give it new creativity and flair. Yet you notice this across the board for thousands of years, this doesn't happen. And that would be the case if it actually was real, that most of the people that did see them actually really did. And so they're not going to change the story because that's what it looked like. Now, interesting, you'll find like in Europe as well as North America, they always talk about the same thing, that their children are being grabbed from them and then taken off. And it's interesting, you can actually find photographs from explorers where they found some native tribes, and native tribes are not supposed to have hair on them like what they do in some of these photographs you can find, but they look like they're half Bigfoot. And this is not a joke or meant to be insulting or any of that kind of stuff, but either this native tribe had some unusual overgrowth of hair, sort of a thing that was indigenous just to that particular tribe or something, or B, as their stories say, they say that they were children of these wild men of the woods and stuff like that. And there is photographs that are super old, they weren't photoshopped, all that kind of stuff like that, and it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, that could be real if that is real. Like, I mean, if the odd one reported escape from them when they would be kept there as part of the tribe sort of thing, and these stories exist, if they were real, where the odd one they let them loose, just like human beings. I mean, some people can escape from somebody else, so it is feasible. And these fascinating photos that you can find of this kind of stuff is very interesting. I mean, to say the least, either that or unknown to ethnologists and stuff like that. These people may have, some groups may have had some kind of a thing that's very similar to an overgrowth of a hair syndrome that you'll find in some other countries, especially in Europe and stuff like that. These they used to put some of the kids sometimes, or adults, they would put them in these shows saying like they were half man, half human sort of thing, and they were and they just suffered from this overgrowth of a hair on them. But I mean, besides that, though, it's very interesting if you think about it, that here these cultures separately are, reporting identical same behaviors and stuff like that. That seems, again, very unlikely if it's made up. Now, here's some areas here of England, Great Britain that have sightings still to this day. There's the Dunbar wild man reported sometimes by skiers or hikers. in the Bancora area, also sightings, as well as Walkerwood Reservoir. Also picked up some kind of bizarre little lake monster, like a sighting off of there once, but I have never heard anything more about it, so I don't really know that familiar with the reservoir's depths or the different stuff. So I'd have to investigate it further. But I do recall some kind of strange other tale from that area. In Kentford, the Isle of Man, Brasser Hill, as well as numerous other places, have these stories. Some seem to be more like chimp-like, or so they might have been released pets, things like that. And of course, my favorite, I mean, they even have them in Sherwood Forest. I mean, how can you beat that, Sherwood Forest? I mean, so apparently they didn't see Big John or Maid Marian. Too bad. Maid Marian was supposed to be quite cute there, but nevertheless, and they didn't see Robin in his tights there, or the big fat Friar Tuck guy there scavenging for some fish and chips. But they have reported from time to time an 8-foot red-eyed Sasquatch sometimes in those ancient woods. So that's pretty entertaining. So I wonder if the sheriff of Nottingham and stuff like that was being harassed by this, 8-foot red-eyed Sasquatch there. But nevertheless, then and there's all kinds of other ones like that. But I'm just putting in a little bit of these for fun, just to give you an idea how many countries have these kinds of stories. So I'm not going to make this a big one. Just to give you a basic idea here. Ireland, besides leprechauns, and of course, giant eels, fairies, and the banshees, and all kinds of other ghouly ghouls that come creeping around the forest there. They also have some Sasquatch sightings. To werewolf-like sightings, like one, they have a local name for it. They call it the Osari Wolfman, and it howls and growls similar to Wolfman reports in Wisconsin, stuff like that. Along France, along the coast, they have the nearby Rocquean Bay howler that can be heard from time to time screaming in the night. So to me, it's probably screaming about maybe eating empty cans of, or partially eating away cans of escargot or something like that, maybe. Also, the French province of Savoie also has a tale or two. Grenoble, France, and has a cave monster sighting there. One thing about wild man that proves to me that it may be that we may be evolving into them and not the opposite. And so these scientists may have it backwards. I mean, think about it. Who is superior? Like, we cannot catch one, but reports often show that they can catch one of us. So since ancient times, it's very rare we can catch one, but usually they're always grabbing one of our children or wives or somebody. I haven't heard too many guys being captured, but there has been a few. One was supposed to be some lady Sasquatch's love slave and stuff like that, and that's happened to women as well. And so that's another interesting tidbit. But I mean, think about it. I mean, they don't have to pay taxes for roads, etc., like that. They don't have to pay for items or food, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Like a lot of humans out there, they have to pay for those kinds of things. And most of all, in France, they do not have to pay for the $10 toilet fee. That is typical in some of the areas there if you're a tourist and stuff like that. So for me, the case is clear that we have evolved into, if we evolved into them, we could be stronger, and survive with no help, pay no taxes. The hairy part would be a bit gross. I mean, that'd be a bit harsh there for some, especially the modeling world and stuff like that. But nevertheless, nothing a silk and laser couldn't fix or something like that. But so there you have it. The proof is clear. We likely soon will be hairy and smelly but strong, but we're going to be debt free. So, however, as you know, with all benefits, there usually comes a few minus involving or not. But soon we will all live in a world debt and prejudice free, and let us rejoice in our new theory and all release our inner wild. So there you go. So that's going to be happening soon there. We're all going to turn into a bunch of big monkey ape people. And jumping around, not paying taxes and stuff like that. So it's going to be, a pretty good entertaining scene here. So if you don't believe me, there's one of us coming up there now. You can see him on the right there, little munchkin Bigfoot. But all kidding aside here, and next one here we'll go into Scotland there, the Ben Macdoy Mountain and the Cairngorms, also the Black Mountains, Isle of Skye, the River Dee, as several reports along it over the ages. Briark, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, and some others. A typical description is more often a gray to darker coat or fur, or feeling of some huge shadow following the hikers when they're going around the area. As for instance, in the Daily Star report in 2004, about one sighting reported that the witnesses were being attacked by a 12-foot giant on an over 4,000-foot summit while camping. The creature attacked at their tent. So interesting that these stories and stuff like that. You also have Italy there. There was newspaper reports back in 1997 about a policeman who witnessed a 2-meter plus tall ape-like creature with a body of an ape and a face more like a man. I can find only a few real old mentions of some kind of hairy man, and near zero modern reports show likely the Italian version of this Bigfoot. If it exists, must be real. If it is, well hidden and staying away from the vino and the valleys, I'd imagine there. But nevertheless, like I was wondering here, like there's a lot of stories of kings or royalty that have owned wild men, and I wonder if, like, as a for instance here, King James of Scotland, if he had too many ales, at one of his shindigs, if he would have said, "I tell you, Agnes, I tell you, Agnes, I see that hairy child." She responds, "No, sir, that is just my mop." So, but no, in that case, that actually was a real kid suffering from, I believe that, hairy disease. I can't think of the name of it this second. It's not propecia. It's some or some name close, something like that. But anyways, it's this overgrowth, a hair a sort of syndrome that some people will get, but it's never been known in the native community. So, and also, it's what's interesting about it is that you actually see almost like a split there, where a portion of their body is super furry, and then the rest is not furry at all. Whereas in these kinds of situations, usually they're furry from head to foot, sort of thing like that. So very interesting. Now. Switzerland and Sweden. Now, of all the Bigfoot-like beasts seen, this one I would love to go chase. Now, main reason is since I've been a kid there, I've had the odd dream of going down there to Sweden or Switzerland, these places all through Europe. And now the odds of me meeting the real Swiss monster there is probably near about zero. But what I was hoping for is... preferably I wouldn't mind finding some kind of a lady named maybe like Inga or something like that. She's got to be way high up in the mountains, just like I got her depicted here. And here's another art piece there by Dar. And so got her here sitting out there. She's collecting the herbs. She's up in the mountains, got to be high elevation. I want to see her, preferably though, she's got to have the ponytail sort of ringlets there on both sides, whatever you call that hairdo, and she's got to be yodeling, and she's got to have a basket of flowers with her or something like that, and preferably a bottle of vino is fine as well. But what my idea would be is that she's going to run into me and she's going to say, "Hello, kind sir. My name is Inga. Are you lost?" And I'm going to say, "Yes, I am, goddess. I mean, Inga. Well, then come back to my house and I'm going to make you some kruterkraft tea." And then I'm going to be sitting there with Inga and maybe stay there lost forever. Now, I might not find the Swiss hairy Bigfoot there, but at least I'm going to find something just about way more entertaining, I would say the least. But all kidding aside, though, Switzerland and Sweden does have these like places like Bollnäs still gets reports, and Helsing Trail. Now, as I was saying, she's got to be yodeling, though. I mean, seriously, and I wouldn't mind, or if she doesn't have the kruderkraft there, she can always have maybe some large crafts of ale there, some kind of Swedish beer or something like that, or maybe some of those Logan berries there, I think they're called. Are they ever delicious? If you never tried them, they're from Sweden, and possibly, I don't know exactly their whole growing range, but somewhere in that particular areas there, and absolutely delicious. Apparently, they're fairly good for you too there, and that as well. well. You can actually get them at IKEA actually sells them. So if you haven't tried them, they're quite delicious. I quite like them anyways. You can get an ice cream cone with them and stuff like that. So, but all kidding aside, though, it's very interesting. Some of the bizarre reports there, like there was one there about this. A giant Swedish hairy lady that reports sounds, she's super over hairy, and she definitely needs that Silken Deluxe. And the locals called her Helga the Hairy. And she was seen by a bunch of maidens picking flowers in the high mountains, which they would flee from fear, hoping she does not bring them back to her cave there. So they were pretty scared of Big Helga there. But nevertheless, speaking of Helgas here, here's an odd story that I got that was so funny I had to include this. Germany has a long history, actually, of a few wild man sightings, of course, unicorns and things like that. Now, I met this tall German woman that you would likely, even if you were a big fellow, say, hello, ma'am, or yes, ma'am, because seriously, she was quite the she was a fairly scary kind of a demeanor to her. Let's put it this way for a female. So nevertheless, but she was actually a really nice lady and stuff like that. But she just had this kind of don't mess with me sort of look to her, and broad-shouldered and arms and legs and fists and body on her that would make a lot of Hercules guys jealous there. So that's all I can say. But nevertheless, I was with a fellow friend of mine. He is from Yugoslavia, and he wanted to go down and check out this some kind of Oktoberfest beer garden sort of thing. So anyways, we go down there, and all of a sudden we start talking to this lady, and she said she was from Germany and stuff like that. And not only did she mention about some relative that she had that had saw a unicorn over in Germany, but this was the best one yet. She started mentioning that she remembered in her village, in the area where she had lived around, when she was young, that she had heard these tales and stuff about that there was this giant hairy man, and it was around the Second World War. That people were seeing and stuff like that. And apparently it had a big beard. He was all furry, about 6-7 feet tall on him, a big, huge, kind of a furry looking man. But he had a mustache that was similar looking to Hitler's. So I was seriously, how could you beat that? The place was called Oldenwall. And it was around some forested area somewhere around there. So, but anyways, it was like around 7 feet tall. That's what she was saying. So, I mean, how can you beat that? So some of the locals thought it was some kind of mutant or something like that. And, or who knows, maybe she had too many Bavarian beers there and stuff like that. I have no idea, but absolutely fascinating. A great story. I absolutely loved it. I like the idea of that, a giant Hitler Sasquatch. That sounds pretty wild. But nevertheless, here's like Yugoslavia, Croatia, and Serbia all, separated now and stuff like that. But now, sightings from along the Danube River I've collected from a man from Croatia, and also from a guy in Serbia that I collected reports from, and a few third-party reports as well. I met a man that in the later 30s as a kid, he was walking along the Danube, and he saw a creature that was about 8 feet tall that looked like what he thought was some kind of big, hairy man sort of idea, and it was drinking water along the edge on the other side beside a forest. And then it stood up on its 2 legs after drinking and walked back into the forest. It was covered like with the stick matted hair, dark brown to blackish in color. Locals have various names for this area beast. And actually, the stories are fairly consistent over a long time, like areas like Fruskagora, Montenegro. Some go back as far as I found in the 1800s and stuff like that, probably way before that. But I mean, there's only so much research you can do, unless you're there all the time looking in their old archives and stuff like that. But I asked one, are you for sure it was not the Schlimmens you were drinking? Because I was teasing them that they like making this Yugoslavian plum wine. or some kind of plum brandy sort of stuff. It's absolutely delicious, but nevertheless, he was said no, he didn't, wasn't doing that and that sort of stuff like that. So, but now, even in that area, there's even been religious monks in monasteries around that region that have seen these kinds of stuff. So it's very interesting, you know. And there's even one film that's not that massive far off from that area with a Sasquatch-like creature. That's actually not bad. If it is a person in a suit, it was very well done. But now, next here, Poland. Now, I love this country for stories. Not only have I collected numerous unicorn stories, it also has, of course, old Bigfoot sightings type things as well. And I would not mind seeing Stifler's mother if I was down there. I'm sure if we went out for a hike for Sasquatch, one would come out and want to peek at that for sure. One funny story, though, about a peeping Tom Bigfoot that was peeking out a young lady in her bathing suit caused a big fury there in the Tatra Mountains. She was just 19 at the time and a beauty queen sort of idea when the slightly in love like King Kong beast came out of the woods and was starting to make some pretty luring peeks at her sort of thing there. So yeah, you know, poor old Bigfoot there. He's alone in Poland, and you know, some kind of a lady that looked like a miniature version of Stifler's mother was out walking in the forest. You can't blame him. I mean, seriously. So there you go. I mean, if that isn't proof they could exist, I mean, they're even doing natural, typical guy-like behavior. Oh, well, man, there's a cute girl over there, and they come running out of the forest. So maybe these old stories of the maiden attracting the unicorns might have some reality to them. I mean, I can't see any creature not thinking, you know, some Mrs. Cornhusker there from Nebraska or something like that isn't going to be cute. Yeah, you know what I mean? So it is possible that maybe the odd ones when they see a cute female that interests them, they want to come out and take a peek at her or stuff like that, or possibly female looking at a guy, or vice versa, or whatever the combination there may be, right? But nevertheless, now we'll get into the more serious areas there: Russia, Mongolia, China, of course. Like, I mean, these stories go back for eons. But I'm just going to start like here. We'll start at a later date. Actually, I mean, they go way before this even. But in the 12th century, there you find an account of wild man giants being described living in the Turkish deserts that were thought to be similar to humans. In 1430, Mr. Schiltberger wrote an account about these wild men being seen in Asia. He mentions they are large and all furry, with only the hands and face are free of hair. They run around the hills like animals, he said, and eat leaves and grass. And the lord of the territory where he was had actually captured a few of these forest ape-men people, and gave them away as some kind of gift or something like that, presented them. The Russian explorer Nikolai Przewalski, who was the discoverer of the Przewalski's horse, a horse thought to have been extinct for eons, stuff like that. He had heard these stories. He didn't actually see one, but he had heard of them and stuff like that. They were described like 7 to 12 feet tall. The forehead is somewhat sloped back, as well as large eyes and a lower jaw and mouth lower, and huge big feet with long hands and claws sometimes, which is identical to the reports of Sasquatch, right to the T. Russian soldiers, in one account, shot and killed a wild man in their official reports in a cave. One more modern account mentions about 30 people all at the same time. I mean, that's extraordinary, all seeing a Bigfoot eating corn in a field. Okay, so odds would be that many people to all make mistakes for a bear, etc., would be zero. I mean, seriously. Since all agreed as to what they saw, this seems an incredible rare event, and how a skeptic can say 30 random people with obviously different eyesight capabilities could all still match what they saw totally seems improbable, unless they actually really did see something there. You know. So, I mean, here's the astounding size of the forests in Russia alone: over 7 million kilometers. 7 million of untouched forest kilometers. I mean, do you really believe, like, even if there was a few expeditions a year, It's for the last hundreds of years, let's say. We'll make it up. We'll say even scientists were constantly every year going on an expedition to find the Yeti in that square mileage. Okay, the odds of you picking a group of 50, 20, 10 people, 100, let's say 100 did it a year, the odds of you finding the right spot in a 7 million kilometer untouched zone is below anything. Like, I mean, it's not. So that is why these kinds of stuff like that, North America even has, I mean, all these, like, armies of scientists could go in there all the time and still never find everything in there. I mean, it's just literally with that kind of terrain and that much, it's way more, than what's logically feasible. The small amount of people traversing on scientific expeditions could discover. China alone has near 1,900,000 square miles of forest. Again, do you really think that small groups of scientists for decades could cover all that terrain and discover everything? So you got to think about these kinds of stuff. Like, so there you have it, and not to mention, like, I didn't mention Bulgaria and Spain much or stuff like that. There's other countries, but it's just because the sightings are so infrequent and so just it's not. I just mentioned them as an extra thing, but I mean they're not really like. If they did exist, it was massive hundreds of years ago, likely, and not likely of today. But Canada has near 4 million kilometers of wilderness. The Amazon alone, Brazil alone has over 5 million kilometers. I mean, if you think about that, that's a massive amount of terrain for scientists and humans to cover perfectly, and to say that they found everything, I find that absolutely the most pompous, that we believe we're that great that we'd be able to cover every micro inch of something. It's not. Now maybe someday this will be the case with these drones and all this kinds of stuff like that, but for the time being this is still not the case, and there's lots of stuff out there that still needs to be found. So now, next we're going to go about Russian lake monsters. Not only are they consistent for hundreds of years, they're much older than Loch Ness and many of the tales and stuff like that, but have also been quite frequently witnessed by Russian scientists, unlike a lot of our North American reports. Were not remotely as many were scientists that have seen such things. And a lot of them have actually taken serious investigations and went to some of these and have came back with very interesting kinds of evidence, like Siberia's Lake Labinker. This lake has had huge sonar blimps indicating a creature of immense size. You can see down here, that's very interesting. I mean, these kinds of big blimps I've actually ran across before in my lifetime. Maybe not as big as this one, but it's hard to say because I'm not that exact model and the different stuff like that. Back in the day, when a lot of these that I ran across, I mean, there was no literature how to tell. I could tell, like, if I was over a sunken old house or a rock reefs or all these kinds of stuff. But certain objects that you would run across from time to time seem very strange, and you couldn't figure out what exactly that they may be. And they certainly weren't schools of fish and stuff like that, but they looked to be solid objects, and the size of them was extraordinary. I mean, some the size of the whole screen pretty well, nearly, at the time. So, I mean, I find that interesting because it does look very similar to some of the records that I picked up myself, or I've seen others that have done the same, Now, Lake Labinker is very interesting. One group went down there. This is a claimed supposed picture. They also claim this picture comes from another lake, Lake Alania or something like that, also in Russia from other sources. So I don't really know, but apparently this is one photo of the Lake Labinker monster. But it's very interesting. But I do know that sonar was from the Lake Labinker monster there. So very interesting. And these are different ones that they post and stuff like that. Now, Lake Baikal in Russia. It's near 32,000 square miles of surface area and home to one of the world's only year-round pure freshwater seal populations, as well as reports for hundreds of years of a giant monster in the lake. Now, considering some of the depths approach 5,000 feet, the odds of it not having a few unknowns is much greater than it does not. I mean, seriously, to me, that I would not be surprised if there's some kinds of landlocked shark species in there, all kinds of things that may not be known. I would absolutely, out of all the Russian lakes I would like to go to, this would be near the top of the list. Besides, as I mentioned, that lake where that one particular film that I saw is so convincing to me that I would gladly even freeze near to death to go do this. And I believe me, I do not like the cold anymore. I want to live in a warmer climate. Every year I just like the cold more and more. Back in the day, I thought nothing of even ice fishing out at minus 50 something a few times and things like that. I was absolutely crazy. Hundreds of people would be inside their vehicles, never go outside. They wouldn't even check their ice holes. And I'd be out there just staying all day out in that freezing stuff like that. And that's why I was rewarded constantly with fish, because I had a willpower of craziness there. And I still do stuff like this occasionally from time to time in the cold water things. But I just not really, I don't like it like what I used to. Just every year it gets a bit worse. So for me to be willing to do this, it would actually be quite the sacrifice. But at the same token, I would love to really investigate the lake angling wise and hunt for things that I suspect that may exist in there with a variety of different kinds of equipment and stuff like that. Because I don't believe that they claim there's only, I think about 60 species of fish or something like that, a little over that. That seems very highly improbable in a lake of such a giant size. There's got to be more in there unknown to science, as well as whatever this giant monster thing is. This I don't know. The reports are very, but anywhere from a dragon to almost like a giant walrus-looking thing. So depending on the story, but it's interesting. Nevertheless, more interest to me almost in the monster, because I doubt the odds of me seeing that running across, considering it's 32,000 square miles of surface, would be slim. But it would not be as slim hunting for species unknown to science with particular baits and different things like that. There's different areas that are going to attract fish logically across the world, whether it be in Russia to downtown Ottawa. There's certain particular kinds of structure that always attract fish around the world near any species. And because of my background and well over 100,000 plus hours of doing that kinds of stuff, I believe that I would be able to probably locate some species unknown to science in there for sure, without having to do netting and stuff like that. I would not doubt if there's even possibly some unknown endemic species of sturgeon besides the ones that are known to traverse it, because there's the Lake Baikal sturgeon, but there could be others. There could be other things in there, so it is possible. So out of all the lakes, I would find this one a very interesting one. But for hopes of actually seeing a lake monster, if one exists, which wouldn't surprise me, like I said, in such a giant body of water, and considering again over 5,000 foot depths, and that's what's known. I mean, there's all kinds of areas that haven't been fully explored. So I mean, wow, who knows? There might be some interesting things in there. But Lake Brosno, that's one's located in a very region in Russia, and only has a depth of near 150 feet from some spot. But then you get these other stories where it's hard to tell whether that's reality or not. But nevertheless, there's supposed to be like a lot of dead wood that floats up and gas boils up. So that's the main theory of what the monster is. But on the other hand, though, I mean, a lot of interesting stories, and I mean, they go back way, like in the 13th century, I mean, which is way before Loch Ness and stuff like that. The Mongol army there tried to invade, and actually had seen things like that. So it's interesting, and there is scientist reports and different ones where they have run across some kind of a unusual a big thing in there. So it could be, but I mean, it's hard to say unless you were actually out the lake and could see what's really going on. It's hard to make such a statement. But and now Eggleton Lake, this interesting cryptid lake has depths over 500 feet. So perfect type lake, monster lake, over 46 miles long. So much bigger nests and great depths to it and stuff like that. It's a strange lake. It's almost round like and some people suspect it was made created by a meteor or possible a volcano. There's also and usually the reports the same thing. It's like a big Loch Ness monster kind of a sort of thing that comes out the depths, But there's Lake Sadozero, said to be located in the Kola Peninsula, and it also has reports of lake monsters and also the Alma type of beast being seen along its shores there and stuff like that. And occasionally, same thing, this monster will rise from the middle of the lake. I mean, where else would it come from but the middle of the lake, of course? But Lake Kair and Yakatuya area has many tales of strange things in this lake, although small lake reports persist, So one witness in the 60s saw a huge snake-like beast in the lake. There's lake bats also has giant snake-like reports, and many others out there, including one amazing film that you can find on YouTube that I've mentioned several times that I know is not any known species and seems so lifelike. The odds of it fake seems extremely remote, to say the least. So my conclusion is that likely of all places, some of these lakes and others in remote areas with little human inhabitants has a much larger chance of still living some kinds of unknowns in Russia than in a lot of other places, actually, just simply because the extreme climate and stuff like that, the lack of scientists' money to be able to investigate these things thoroughly, and a whole host of other reasons, So, but no, so that's about it. I just wanted to give you an introduction of the fascinating thing about Russian lake monsters. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. It's absolutely fascinating. Many lakes have reports of people being attacked by the monsters, knocking over their boats, eating children, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's very fascinating. So, but now I'm going to do one there that I've done the other one more time here. Now, do angels exist? Now, the one on the left I saw in a dream, and I'm sure hoping she's real, because quite the cutie pie there, and I've seen her a few times in a dream. It was a very strange dream.